The basement was cold, dark, silent. Carolyn Whitmore sat on the concrete floor, 8 months pregnant, wearing nothing but a thin silk nightgown. Her husband had locked her down there 3 hours ago, and he was not coming back until morning. Upstairs, Derek poured himself another glass of scotch, turned on the television, settled into the couch like nothing had happened. He had no idea that 3 miles away, his billionaire father-in-law was watching everything. Richard Ashford had built a security empire worth billions. He had installed cameras in every property he owned, including one camera that Derek never knew existed, a camera hidden in that cold, dark basement. What Richard saw on his screen that night changed everything. But here is the thing, that one night was just the beginning, because when Richard started reviewing the footage archives, he discovered something even more horrifying. 3 years of secrets, 3 years of lies, 3 years of abuse that no one knew about, until now. This is the story of a woman who lost herself inside a perfect marriage, a father who refused to look away, and a monster who thought he would never get caught. Stay with me until the end, because what happens next will leave you breathless. The basement door slammed, the lock clicked, and Carolyn Whitmore realized she had finally run out of chances. She stood at the top of the stairs, her hands still reaching for the doorknob that would not turn. The metal was cold against her palm, cold like her husband's voice had been just moments ago, cold like the darkness that yawned below her, waiting to swallow her whole. Derek. She pressed both palms flat against the wooden door. Derek, please, I am 8 months pregnant. You cannot do this. Nothing, no footsteps approaching, no voice responding, just the faint sound of ice cubes clinking into a glass somewhere in the kitchen, the familiar splash of scotch being poured. The creak of a bar stool as her husband sat down to enjoy his drink while his pregnant wife stood trapped at the top of a dark staircase. Carolyn's heart pounded against her ribs. Her daughter kicked, as if sensing her mother's distress. 8 months pregnant, barefoot, still wearing the thin silk nightgown she had put on 3 hours ago, back when she thought this would be an ordinary Tuesday night. Back when her biggest worry had been the strange text message she had glimpsed on her husband's phone. A woman's name, Natalie, a heart emoji, 3 simple words that had unraveled everything she thought she knew about her marriage. Miss you already. She had made the mistake of asking about it. That was her crime. That was what had led her here, to this locked door, to this dark staircase, to this cold basement waiting below. You want to keep accusing me? Derek's voice had been ice, calm and measured and utterly without warmth. His blue eyes had gone flat, the way they always did when he was about to punish her. Fine, you can think about what you have done down there. Maybe a few hours in the dark will teach you to trust your husband. His hand had gripped her arm, not hard enough to bruise this time, just hard enough to guide her toward the basement door, just hard enough to remind her who was in control. The lock had clicked behind her before she could even process what was happening. Now Caroline descended slowly, one hand gripping the wooden railing, the other cradling the swell of her belly. Each step creaked beneath her bare feet. The temperature dropped with every stair she took, the October chill seeping up from the concrete below. By the time she reached the bottom, goosebumps had risen across her arms and her teeth had begun to chatter. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floors stained with decades of use. Exposed pipes running along the ceiling like metal veins. Cardboard boxes stacked against the walls. Remnants of a move that had never been fully completed. The furnace hummed in the corner, but its warmth did not reach this far. The only light came from a small window near the ceiling, barely larger than a shoebox. Moonlight filtered through dirty glass, casting pale silver shadows across the floor. Caroline wrapped her arms around herself, around her daughter. The nightgown was thin, meant for the heated bedroom upstairs, not a concrete basement in late October. She could already feel her body temperature dropping, could feel her fingers growing stiff with cold. She needed to find something warm, something to sit on, something to protect herself and her baby from the hours ahead. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness. She spotted an old patio cushion leaning against the far wall, left over from summer furniture that had been stored and forgotten. She dragged it to the corner farthest from the stairs, the corner where the moonlight was strongest, and lowered herself down carefully. The cushion was dusty, smelled like mildew and forgotten summers. But it was better than the bare concrete, better than nothing. Carolyn drew her knees up as close as her pregnant body would allow, wrapped her arms around her shins, tried to conserve whatever warmth remained in her body. Her daughter kicked again, once, twice, a tiny heel pressing against her ribs, demanding attention. I know, baby. Carolyn placed one hand on her stomach, feeling the movement beneath her palm. I know, Mama is scared too. The concrete was cold beneath her. The air smelled like dust and motor oil and the faint chemical tang of old paint cans. Somewhere above her, she could hear Derek moving through the house, his footsteps steady and unhurried, the refrigerator opening and closing, the television turning on, some late-night talk show filling the silence with canned laughter. He was comfortable up there, relaxed, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Carolyn closed her eyes and let the tears come. I am not crazy. I know what I saw. The text message had been brief. Just a woman's name, a heart emoji, and those three devastating words, miss you already. The kind of message you send to a lover, not a colleague. The kind of intimacy that had no place on her husband's phone. She had asked about it calmly, quietly, the way she always asked questions now, careful not to provoke, careful not to accuse. She had learned over 3 years of marriage that direct confrontation only made things worse. Who is Natalie? She had asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I saw a message on your phone. Derek's face had changed, that flicker of something cold behind his eyes, that tightening of his jaw that she had learned to fear. You were looking through my phone? No, I just saw it. The screen lit up and I happened to see. You happened to see. His voice dripped with contempt. You just happened to be spying on your husband. I was not spying. I would never. Enough. He had stood up from the couch, his full height looming over her. I am tired of your paranoia, your constant accusations, your inability to trust the man who has given you everything. Derek, I am not accusing you of anything. I just want to understand. You want to understand? He grabbed her arm, pulled her toward the hallway. Then let me help you understand something. In this house, in this marriage, I do not answer to you. You answer to me. And when you forget that, there are consequences. The basement door, the lock clicking, the darkness swallowing her whole. Now Caroline sat in that darkness, her arms wrapped around her unborn daughter, and wondered how her life had come to this. Wondered how the fairy tale she thought she was living had become this nightmare. Wondered if anyone would ever know what happened behind the closed doors of this beautiful brownstone. Probably not, she thought. No one ever sees the truth until it is too late. 3 miles away, Richard Ashford could not sleep. This was not unusual for a man of 62. Sleep had become an unreliable companion in recent years, visiting some nights and abandoning him on others. Tonight was one of the abandoning nights. No matter how many positions he tried, no matter how many sheep he counted, his mind refused to quiet. His wife Margaret was traveling, visiting her sister Eleanor in Connecticut the way she did every few months. The house felt too large without her on it, too quiet, too empty, the kind of silence that made a man think too much. Richard sat up in bed, swung his legs over the side, padded barefoot across the hardwood floor to his home office at the end of the hall. The room was dark except for the blue glow of his laptop, left open on the mahogany desk. Richard lowered himself into his leather chair and stared at the screen. 2:17 in the morning. Another night of insomnia stretching ahead of him. He should try warm milk, or meditation, or one of those sleep podcasts Margaret was always recommending. Instead, he opened his security monitoring software. A habit, a ritual. The thing he did when he could not sleep and needed something to occupy his racing mind. Richard Ashford had built a security technology empire from nothing. Started in his garage 40 years ago, tinkering with alarm systems and surveillance equipment. Now his company protected banks and government buildings and private residences across 47 countries. His face had graced the covers of Forbes and Bloomberg Businessweek more times than he could count. His net worth was measured in billions, not millions. He had spent his life keeping other people safe. It was not just his business, it was his purpose, his identity, the thing that got him out of bed every morning. And yet somehow, impossibly, he had failed to keep his own daughter safe. He did not know that yet, but he was about to find out. Richard clicked through the security feeds of his various properties. The beach house in the Hamptons, dark and empty for the season. The cabin in Aspen, equally quiet. The office building downtown, security guards making their rounds through empty hallways. And then his daughter's home. The brownstone in the city that he had given to Caroline as a wedding gift 3 years ago when she married Derek Whitmore. Richard had installed the security system himself. State-of-the-art, the best his company had to offer. Cameras in all the common areas, motion sensors, smart locks that could be monitored remotely. Everything a paranoid father could want to keep his only child safe. But there was one camera that Derek did not know about. The basement camera. Richard had added it during the renovation, 3 months before the wedding. A last-minute decision, a feeling he could not explain to himself or anyone else. He had run the wiring himself, hidden the small device behind a heating vent where no one would ever think to look. Call it instinct, call it paranoia, call it the quiet voice of a father who had seen too much of the world to trust anyone completely, even the man his daughter claimed to love. He had never told anyone about the camera. Not Margaret, not Caroline, not even his head of security. It was his secret, his insurance policy. The thing that let him sleep at night, knowing that if anything ever happened, he would have proof. Now Richard clicked through the feeds from Caroline's brownstone. Kitchen, empty except for the dirty dishes in the sink. Living room, dark, the television off. Master bedroom, empty, the bed unmade. His finger paused on the trackpad. Where was Caroline? Where was Derek? He clicked to the next camera. The guest room, empty. The next, the nursery they had been preparing for the baby. Empty. And then the basement. Richard's heart stopped. His daughter was sitting on the concrete floor, in the dark, in her nightgown, her arms wrapped around her pregnant belly, her face pale and tear-streaked in the moonlight coming through that tiny window near the ceiling. She was shivering. Even through the grainy footage, he could see her body trembling with cold. Richard's hand flew to his phone. He dialed Caroline's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, 4. Her voicemail picked up, her cheerful recorded voice a cruel contrast to the image on his screen. He hung up, dialed again. Same result. He switched camera feeds. Kitchen. And there was Derek, sitting at the island with a glass of scotch in his hand, scrolling through his phone like he did not have a care in the world. Like his pregnant wife was not sitting on a cold basement floor just 2 floors below. Richard dialed Derek's number. Richard. Derek's voice was smooth, polished. The voice of a man who had never been caught at anything in his life. It is late. Is everything all right? Richard watched his son-in-law's face on the camera feed as he answered the phone. Watched the easy smile, the relaxed posture, the complete lack of concern. Where is my daughter? Caroline? A hint of confusion in Derek's voice, perfectly calibrated. She is sleeping. The pregnancy exhausts her. You know how it is. She went to bed hours ago. Richard watched Derek lie, watched his son-in-law take another casual sip of scotch, watched him scroll through his phone with his free hand, barely paying attention to the conversation. I see. I will call tomorrow then. Of course, give my best to Margaret. I will. Richard hung up the phone, set it down on the desk with exaggerated care. For a long moment, he did not move. He just sat there staring at the split screen on his laptop. His daughter in the basement, shivering and alone. His son-in-law in the kitchen, comfortable and content. The lie hanging in the air between them. Then Richard Ashford, billionaire and builder of empires, began to move with cold efficiency. He saved the footage from tonight, time-stamped it, backed it up to 3 separate encrypted servers. His hands were steady now. The trembling that had started when he first saw his daughter on that basement floor had stopped completely. In its place was something else, something focused, something dangerous. He opened the camera archives, started scrolling back through the footage from the past weeks, the past months, the past 3 years. What he saw made his blood run cold. His daughter curled on that same basement floor 3 months ago, crying, her arms wrapped around her belly, already swelling with pregnancy. His daughter 6 weeks ago, a bruise visible on her upper arm as she descended the stairs into the darkness. His daughter again and again and again banished to that cold concrete prison while her husband went about his life upstairs. 3 years of footage. 3 years of abuse hidden in plain sight. 3 years of his daughter suffering while he remained oblivious. Richard picked up his phone, made 3 calls, his driver. James, I need you here in 15 minutes. This is not a request. His lawyer. Victor, wake up. We have a situation. Get dressed and get over here now. And the police. I need to speak with Detective Maureen Walsh. Tell her Richard Ashford is calling. Tell her it is urgent. Tell her I have evidence of a crime in progress. The clock on his desk read 2:47 in the morning. By sunrise, everything would be different. His daughter would be free. His son-in-law would be in handcuffs. And the truth that had been hidden for 3 years would finally come into the light. But Richard Ashford did not know the full scope of what he was about to uncover. He did not know about the other women, the other victims, the pattern that stretched back years before his daughter ever met Derek Whitmore. He would find out soon enough. 3.5 years ago, on a perfect September evening, Caroline Ashford met the man who would destroy her life. The ballroom of the Ashford Foundation headquarters glittered with crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes. This was the annual charity gala, the crown jewel of the New York social calendar, and every seat at every table cost more than most people made in a year. Women in designer gowns drifted between conversations, their diamonds catching the light. Men in tailored tuxedos discussed stock prices and merger opportunities and which of the catering company's hors d'oeuvres were worth sampling. Caroline stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights sparkle in the darkness beyond. She was 26 years old, quietly beautiful in a way that did not demand attention, but earned it anyway. Dark hair swept up in an elegant twist, a simple navy dress that her mother had insisted on buying for her, despite Caroline's protests about the price tag. She had just finished her master's degree in art history. She was working at a small gallery in the village, earning barely enough to cover her rent, but happy in a way that money could not buy. She loved her work, loved helping artists share their vision with the world, loved the quiet satisfaction of matching the right piece with the right collector. She had her whole life ahead of her, a future full of possibility, dreams she was only beginning to articulate. She had no idea that in less than 10 minutes, all of those dreams would start to crumble. You look like you would rather be anywhere else. Carolyn turned. A man had appeared beside her, seemingly out of nowhere. Tall, dark hair, blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her. He was holding 2 glasses of champagne, one extended toward her like an offering. That obvious? She asked. Only to someone who feels exactly the same way. He smiled, the kind of smile that lit up his whole face, the kind of smile that made you want to smile back. Derek Whitmore. Caroline Ashford. I know. His smile widened. Your father's company handles security for my family's foundation. I have seen your picture in his office, the one from your college graduation. Caroline felt her cheeks warm. That picture is terrible. I keep telling him to take it down. I thought you looked radiant. It was a line. She knew it was a line, the practiced smoothness of a man who had charmed his way through countless social events. But there was something in the way he said it, something in the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room, like nothing else mattered except this moment, this conversation, this connection. So what brings a Whitmore to an Ashford event? She asked, deflecting from the compliment. I thought our families ran in different circles. Your father and my father are discussing a partnership, something about security consulting for our overseas properties. Derek shrugged elegantly. To be honest, I do not pay much attention to the business side. I prefer to focus on the human side, the connections, the relationships. And that is why you are standing here talking to me instead of networking with the other executives? Guilty as charged. He clinked his champagne glass against hers. I saw you standing here looking thoughtful, and I thought to myself, now there is someone worth talking to, someone real, not another corporate drone pretending to care about quarterly projections. Carolyn laughed despite herself. How do you know I am not a corporate drone? Because corporate drones do not stand by the window staring at the city lights with that expression on their face. That is the look of someone with an inner life, someone who thinks about things beyond profit margins and shareholder value. She studied him more carefully now. He was handsome, certainly. The kind of handsome that belonged on magazine covers. But it was more than that. There was an intensity to him, a focus. When he looked at her, she felt truly seen, truly valued. She did not know then that this was his gift, his weapon, the ability to make anyone feel like the center of his universe, the ability to see at squarely what someone needed and become that thing, perfectly, completely, until they were hooked. All she knew was that he made her feel special, chosen, important. They talked for an hour, then two. Derek asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He remembered that she worked at a gallery and asked intelligent questions about the artist she represented. He remembered that she mentioned loving Monet and shared his own thoughts on Impressionism with surprising depth. He was charming, attentive, endlessly interested in everything she had to say. By the end of the evening, Caroline was completely enchanted. The courtship that followed was like something from a romantic movie. Flowers arrived at Caroline's gallery every Friday. Not generic roses, but carefully chosen arrangements that reflected whatever they had discussed that week. When she mentioned loving peonies, peonies appeared. When she talked about the vibrant colors in a Kandinsky painting, she received a bouquet of vivid oranges and yellows and reds. He remembered everything, every detail, every preference, every passing comment. I mentioned once that I like oat milk lattes, Carolyn told Bethany, her voice filled with wonder. Once, in passing. And now every time we get coffee, he orders it for me without even asking. Extra hot, 1 pump of vanilla, exactly the way I like it. Bethany Cole had been Caroline's best friend since freshman year of college. They had been roommates, survived bad breakups and worse hangovers together, promised to always tell each other the truth even when it hurt. Now Bethany stirred her own coffee and said nothing for a long moment. What? Caroline asked. Why are you making that face? I am not making a face. You are definitely making a face. That is your skeptical face, Bethany sighed. He is very charming, Care, almost too charming, like he is performing. He is not performing, he is just attentive. Is that so hard to believe, that someone might actually pay attention to me? Of course not. You deserve someone who pays attention to you. Bethany hesitated. Watch how he is when things do not go his way. That is when you see who someone really is. Caroline dismissed the warning with a wave of her hand. She was in love. She was happy. She did not want to hear anything that might complicate that happiness. Looking back, she would remember this conversation, would remember Bethany's careful concern, would wish, desperately, that she had listened. But that was later, much later, after everything fell apart. 6 months into the relationship, Caroline and Derek went to dinner at an upscale restaurant in Midtown, the kind of place with a 3-month wait for reservations, unless your name was Whitmore and the maitre d' knew your family. Everything was perfect. The candlelight, the wine, the conversation. Derek was charming and attentive, as always. Carolyn felt like the luckiest woman in New York. Then the waiter made a small mistake with Derek's order, brought the steak medium instead of medium rare. Derek's face changed, just for a second. The warmth drained out of his eyes, his jaw tightened. Something cold and contemptuous flickered beneath the surface, like a shark passing just under the water. Then the mask slid back into place. He smiled at the waiter, thanked him politely, asked with perfect courtesy if he might have the steak prepared again. Carolyn noticed the flicker, filed it away in the back of her mind, forgot about it almost immediately. But some part of her remembered, some instinct buried deep in her subconscious, some warning bell that would not start ringing until much, much later. The proposal came 2 months after that, a private beach at sunset, somewhere on Long Island. Her father's security team discreetly positioned nearby, because that was how Richard Ashford showed love. The ring was stunning, a 4-carat diamond surrounded by sapphires that matched her eyes. Derek got down on one knee, took her hand, looked up at her with those intense blue eyes. Caroline Ashford, I have never met anyone like you. You are beautiful and brilliant and kind, and every moment I spend with you is a gift. Will you marry me? Yes. The word came out before she could even think about it. Yes, yes, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, pulled her into his arms, kissed her as the sun sank into the ocean behind them. It was perfect. Everything was perfect. At the engagement party 2 weeks later, Bethany pulled Caroline aside, hugged her tight, whispered in her ear, "I hope I am wrong about him, Care. I really, really hope I am wrong." In the basement, in the present, Caroline wrapped her arms tighter around herself and tried to stop shivering. She thought about the wedding. 300 guests in a cathedral filled with white roses. Her mother crying happy tears in the front row. Her father walking her down the aisle, his face glowing with pride and something that might have been relief. His only daughter married to a man from a good family, settled, safe. None of them knew. None of them suspected. Derek had fooled them all. She thought about the honeymoon, 2 weeks in Italy, Rome and Florence and Venice. Derek had been romantic, attentive, the perfect husband. They made love every night and explored every day, and Carolyn thought she had never been so happy in her entire life. Then they came home, and everything began to change. The shift was gradual. So gradual she almost did not notice. Like a frog in a pot of water, not realizing the temperature was rising until it was too late. First it was suggestions, small ones, reasonable ones, the kind of things a loving husband might say. "That dress is a bit revealing, do you not think, darling? I just do not want other men looking at you the wrong way. Your friend Bethany seems kind of negative. Have you noticed? Maybe you should see her a little less often, for your own peace of mind. I just think you would be happier if you focused on our home instead of that gallery job. The hours are so unpredictable, and we do not need the money." Then it was control, gradual, incremental. The tightening of a noose she did not even know was around her neck. The finances. Derek would handle them. She did not need to worry about money. She did not need her own credit card. She did not need access to their joint accounts. He would take care of everything. Was that not what husbands did? Her job. She quit after 6 months of marriage. Derek convinced her that she was tired, stressed, overworked, that she deserved to relax, to focus on herself, on them, on building their life together. She thought she was making a choice. She did not realize she was giving up her independence. Then isolation. Slow and systematic and devastating. Her parents were too involved in their marriage. They needed space. She should call less often, visit less frequently. Derek's mother said the same thing, did she not? Some distance was healthy. Her friends were negative influences. Bethany especially. Always questioning, always doubting. Was that really the kind of energy Caroline wanted in her life? She canceled plans with Bethany 3 times in a row. By the 4th time, she stopped making plans at all. It was easier than explaining. Easier than admitting that something was wrong. Easier than facing the truth. 3 miles away, Richard Ashford stared at his laptop screen with eyes that had seen too much. He had been scrolling through the archived footage from the basement camera for the past hour. What he found made him sick to his stomach. 3 months ago, Caroline curled on the basement floor crying. She was already showing then, her pregnancy visible beneath her thin shirt. 2 months ago, a bruise on her upper arm, dark purple against her pale skin. She kept turning, trying to hide it from some invisible observer. She did not know the camera was there, did not know anyone was watching. 6 weeks ago, Derek's voice filtering down from upstairs, cold and contemptuous. "You will stay down there until you learn to control your mouth." Richard's driver arrived at 3:15. James had worked for the Ashford family for 20 years. He knew not to ask questions when his employer called with that particular tone in his voice. Victor Langston, the family attorney, arrived 10 minutes later, gray-haired and sharp-eyed even at this ungodly hour. He had been Richard's lawyer and friend for 3 decades. "What is happening?" Victor asked as Richard ushered him into the office. "Watch." They watched the footage together, the archived clips from the past 3 years, the pattern of abuse that had been hiding in plain sight. Victor's face went pale, his hands clenched into fists. "Richard, this is criminal, unlawful imprisonment, domestic abuse, assault, and with her 8 months pregnant. I know what it is. Have you called the police?" "Detective Maureen Walsh. She is on her way." Victor nodded slowly. And you have backup copies of everything? 3 separate servers, time-stamped, encrypted, chain of custody documented. Good. That is good. Victor pulled out his phone. I am going to make some calls. Start building the case. This monster is never going to see the outside of a prison cell. Richard kept scrolling through the footage. There was so much. Hours and hours. Every time he thought he had seen the worst, something new appeared. His daughter, his only child, the light of his life, suffering in silence, hiding her pain from everyone who loved her, trapped in a prison of her husband's making. Richard had built a security empire. He had protected countless people from harm, but he had failed to protect the one person who mattered most. Not anymore. He reached for his phone to check on the detective's ETA. As he did, Margaret's name flashed across the screen. Richard, I am at the airport. I cut my trip short. Something felt wrong. Where are you now? Just landed. I am getting in my car. What is happening? Why do you sound like that? Richard closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and told his wife everything. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a long, terrible moment. Then Margaret spoke. Her voice was ice, fury wrapped in elegance, the controlled rage of a mother whose child had been hurt. I will end him. We will do this properly, legally, completely. Yes, and then I will end him. Carolyn pressed her back against the cold basement wall and watched the moonlight inch across the concrete floor. Hours had passed since Derek locked her down here. She had lost track of exactly how many. There was no clock in the basement, no way to measure the slow crawl of time except by the movement of that pale silver light through the tiny window above. Her body ached from the cold. Her joints were stiff. Her fingers had gone numb long ago, but she barely noticed anymore. Her mind had drifted somewhere far away to a place where the cold could not reach her. She thought about how she got here. Not just tonight, but the whole journey. 3 years of marriage that had somehow led to this moment. Sitting on a concrete floor, 8 months pregnant, waiting for her husband to decide she had been punished enough. How did it come to this? The wedding had been a fairy tale. The honeymoon had been perfect. And then slowly, gradually, imperceptibly, the reality of her marriage had crept in like poison seeping through cracks in a foundation. The suggestions had seemed so reasonable at first. Derek only wanted what was best for her. He was looking out for her, protecting her. Was that not what love looked like? That dress is a bit short, do you not think? I just do not want other men getting the wrong idea. Maybe you should skip the gallery opening. You have been so tired lately. Would it not be nice to stay home and relax? I noticed you were on the phone with your mother for an hour. She calls so often. Is everything okay? I just worry that she's putting too much pressure on you. The suggestions became expectations. The expectations became demands. And somewhere along the way, Caroline stopped recognizing herself. She quit her job at the gallery. Derek said it made sense. The commute was long. The hours were unpredictable. They did not need the money. She should focus on their home, on their life together. What he really meant was she should focus on him. She stopped seeing Bethany. The weekly coffee dates became monthly, then quarterly, then never. Bethany asked too many questions, noticed too many things, made Caroline think thoughts that Derek did not approve of. She stopped calling her parents as often. Once a week became once a month. Once a month became holidays only. Derek said her mother was too involved. Her father was too overbearing. They needed space to build their own family. What he really meant was he needed her isolated, alone, dependent on him and no one else. Carolyn pulled her knees up closer to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. Her daughter kicked against her belly, a tiny protest against the confining position. I know, baby, she whispered. I know, but we need to stay warm. She thought about the first time Derek grabbed her arm, really grabbed it. Not a gentle touch, not a guiding hand, but a grip that left fingerprints bruised into her skin. They had been arguing about visiting her parents for Sunday dinner. Carolyn wanted to go. Derek did not. Your mother criticizes everything I do, he said. The way I dress, the way I talk, the career I chose. I do not want to spend an entire afternoon being judged. She does not criticize you. She just asks questions. That is how she shows she cares. She does not care about me. She cares about controlling you, just like she has always controlled you. That is not fair. My mother is not. Derek's hand shot out, grabbed her upper arm, squeezed, not hard enough to leave permanent marks, not hard enough that she could point to it later and say, look, this is proof, just hard enough to hurt, just hard enough to make his point. I said no. His voice was calm, measured, terrifyingly quiet. We are not going. This discussion is over. Carolyn stared at him, saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Something cold, something dangerous. You are hurting me, she whispered. He released her arm immediately. His face transformed, shifting from that cold stranger back to the man she thought she married. Concerned, apologetic, wounded. Oh God, darling, I am so sorry. I did not mean. I do not know what came over me. The pressure from work has been so intense, and your mother's constant criticism just. I am so sorry. It will never happen again. It happened again and again and again. Carolyn learned to wear long sleeves, to stay quiet when Derek was in certain moods, to anticipate his needs before he had to ask, to make herself smaller, quieter, more agreeable, in the hope that if she was perfect enough, he would not need to hurt her. It never worked. Perfection was an impossible target that Derek kept moving just out of reach. The first time he locked her somewhere, she had questioned a credit card charge, an expensive dinner at a restaurant downtown. The receipt showed two guests. Derek said it was a client meeting. But the restaurant was romantic, intimate, the kind of place you took a lover, not a business associate. She should not have asked. She knew that now. But something in her, some last remnant of the woman she used to be, could not let it go. Who did you have dinner with? Derek's face went cold, that familiar flicker behind his eyes. A client, I told you. I just wondered which client. You did not mention any dinner meetings. I do not report my schedule to you, Carolyn. I am a grown man. I do not need permission to have a meal with a colleague. I am not asking for permission. I am just curious. You are not curious. You are suspicious, paranoid, constantly questioning everything I do, everything I say. He stood up from the couch, looming over her. I am tired of it. I am tired of defending myself in my own home. Derek, you need to learn to trust me. He grabbed her arm, led her down the hallway to the guest room, pushed her inside. The lock clicked behind her. Caroline stood in the middle of the guest room, staring at the closed door. Her heart pounded, her mind raced. This could not be happening. This could not be real. She tried the handle, locked from the outside. She pounded on the door, called Derek's name, begged him to let her out. Nothing. Silence. The sound of his footsteps retreating down the hall. She slept on the narrow guest bed that night, staring at the ceiling. The door did not open until morning. When it did, Derek was standing there with a cup of coffee and an apologetic smile. I am sorry, darling. I overreacted, but you have to understand how hurtful it is when you do not trust me. We are supposed to be partners. We are supposed to believe in each other. Caroline apologized. She did not know what else to do. She apologized for asking questions, for having doubts, for not being a better wife. And somewhere deep inside her, a small voice whispered, this is not normal. This is not love. This is something else entirely. But she pushed that voice down, buried it beneath excuses and rationalizations. Derek was stressed. Work was hard. His family put so much pressure on him. He did not mean it. He apologized. He said he loved her. The signs were there. I just did not want to see them. Then she found out she was pregnant. The test showed 2 pink lines on an ordinary Wednesday morning. Caroline sat on the bathroom floor, staring at those lines, and felt the world shift beneath her feet. A baby. They were going to have a baby. She told Derek that night over dinner, watched his face carefully, looking for warmth, looking for some sign of the man she thought she had married. What she saw instead was calculation. His eyes narrowed slightly, his jaw tightened. Something moved behind his expression, something that looked almost like satisfaction. Then the mask slid into place. "That is wonderful news, darling." He smiled, came around the table, kissed her forehead. "I am so happy. We are going to be a family." But Caroline had seen the flicker. That brief moment before the mask, she knew what he was really thinking. A baby meant she was tied to him forever. A baby meant she could not leave. A baby was another form of control. The months of pregnancy had been strange and surreal. Derek was attentive in public, solicitous, playing the role of doting father-to-be with practiced perfection. He held doors, carried bags, rubbed her swollen feet when her parents came to visit. But in private, the cruelty continued. The criticisms, the isolation, the occasional nights locked in the guest room or the basement when she dared to disagree with him about anything. Her body was changing, growing, creating life, but her spirit was shrinking, folding in on itself, becoming smaller and smaller with each passing day. She rehearsed conversations in the shower, practiced being agreeable, calculated responses that would not set him off. Some days she was so tired from managing his mood that she had nothing left for herself. She became invisible, a ghost in her own home, a shadow of the woman she used to be, and no one noticed. Her parents thought she was happy, glowing with pregnancy, blessed with a wonderful husband and a beautiful home. Her few remaining friends thought she was busy preparing for the baby. Everyone saw what Derek wanted them to see. Only Bethany had seen through the mask, and Caroline had pushed her away. "I am not crazy. I know what I saw. I know what he is. I have always known." Her daughter kicked again, harder this time, demanding attention. Caroline placed both hands on her belly, felt the movement beneath her palms, this tiny life growing inside her, this innocent child who had no idea what kind of family she was being born into. "I will protect you," Caroline whispered. "I do not know how yet, but I will find a way. I will not let you grow up like this. I will not let you learn that this is love." The words felt hollow in the dark basement, empty promises made by a woman who could not even protect herself. But somewhere deep inside of her, a spark ignited, a tiny flame of determination that the cold could not extinguish. This was not love. This was not marriage. This was a prison. And prisons could be escaped. The clock on Richard's desk read 4:17 in the morning. His home office had become a command center. Laptops open on every surface, legal pads covered with notes, phone chargers plugged into every available outlet. The blue glow of multiple screens cast strange shadows on the walls. Victor Langston sat in the leather armchair, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low tones to someone on the other end. Margaret had arrived an hour ago, immaculate as always despite the early hour, her face a mask of controlled fury. Detective Maureen Walsh stood by the window, reviewing the evidence on her tablet. 52 years old, silver hair cropped short, eyes that had seen everything in 3 decades on the force and still managed to care. She had worked with Richard on a security consulting case years ago, and she was one of the few people in the city he trusted completely. "The footage is damning," Walsh said. "Clear evidence of unlawful imprisonment, domestic assault, coercive control. With a pregnant victim, any prosecutor in the city would love to get their hands on this case." "How soon can we move?" Richard asked. "I am assembling a team now. We can be at the house by dawn." Margaret spoke for the first time in an hour. "What about the baby? If he resists, if there is any kind of struggle?" "We will be careful, Mrs. Ashford. Caroline's safety is our top priority." Victor hung up his phone and turned to face the room. His expression was grim. "I have been making calls, reaching out to contacts, and I found something." Richard looked up sharply. "What kind of something?" "Derek Whitmore has done this before." The room went silent. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Richard's jaw tightened. "Explain," he said. Victor spread papers across the desk, notes, names, dates, the accumulated evidence of hours of frantic research. His college girlfriend, a woman named Allison Hart, she was a senior at Georgetown when they dated. Smart, popular, headed to law school. Then she dropped out in the middle of the semester, transferred to a small school in Oregon, disappeared from her entire social circle. What happened? Derek happened. Victor's voice was flat. I tracked her down. She lives in Portland now, works as a librarian. When I said Derek's name, she started crying. Margaret sank into a chair. Oh God. He did the same thing to her. The charm, the attention, then the control, the isolation. When she finally tried to leave, he launched a campaign to destroy her. Spread rumors that she was mentally unstable. Told everyone she was making things up for attention. By the time he was done, no one believed a word she said. Richard felt a cold fury building in his chest. Who else? A former assistant at his first job out of college. A woman named Denise Rawlings. She was his father's executive assistant before being assigned to work with Derek. She left the company suddenly. Could not find work in her field for 2 years. Why? She rejected his advances, refused to date him, so he sabotaged her, sent emails from her account, deleted important files and blamed her, made her look incompetent and dishonest. By the time she realized what was happening, her career was destroyed. Detective Walsh stepped forward. Will they testify? I asked, both of them. They said yes immediately. Victor paused. They said they have been waiting years for someone to believe them. Richard stared at the papers spread across his desk, names, dates, a pattern that had been invisible until now. His son-in-law was not just an abuser. He was a predator, a serial manipulator who had spent years perfecting his techniques. And Richard had welcomed him into his family, had walked his daughter down the aisle, had handed her over to this monster with a smile on his face and pride in his heart. How did we miss this? Margaret asked, her voice breaking. How did we not see what he was? He was careful, Victor said. He learned from each victim, got better at hiding, better at isolating, better at convincing everyone that he was the victim and they were the crazy ones. Until now, Richard said, his voice was quiet, controlled, dangerous. Now we have evidence he cannot explain away. Now we have witnesses. Now we have him. Richard opened the safe in his home office, the one Margaret did not know about, the one hidden behind a false panel in the back of the closet. Inside were files, documentation, research he had conducted quietly over the past 3 years. He had never trusted Derek Whitmore completely. Something about the man had always felt off, too smooth, too polished, too perfect. So Richard had done what Richard always did when he sensed danger. He had investigated, private investigators, background checks, quiet inquiries into Derek's past. The results had been frustrating. Nothing concrete, just hints and whispers. A pattern that was more feeling than fact. The college girlfriend who had transferred schools abruptly. The assistant who had left his company without explanation. Small anomalies that could mean something or nothing. Richard had kept the files anyway, just in case. Now he pulled them out, spread them across his desk alongside Victor's research. The pieces were starting to form a picture. He selects them carefully, Richard said slowly, thinking out loud. Women who are slightly vulnerable, isolated from strong support systems, smart enough to be interesting, but not so connected that they cannot be controlled. Allison was estranged from her family, Victor confirmed. Denise was new to the city, no close friends. And Caroline, Margaret's voice was hollow. We thought we were so close to her, but we were not, were we? We let him convince us to give her space, to stop calling so often, to trust that she was happy. Richard nodded grimly. He studied us, figured out how to get past our defenses, made himself seem like exactly what we wanted for our daughter. He played us, Margaret said. All of us. He did, but he made one mistake. Richard gestured at the laptop screen, still showing the basement footage. He did not know he was being watched. The convoy assembled in Richard's driveway at 5:15 in the morning. 3 patrol cars, 6 officers, Detective Walsh in the lead. Everything by the book. Everything documented. No room for Derek's lawyers to claim procedural errors later. Richard stood beside his SUV. James, his driver, waited behind the wheel. Margaret sat in the back seat, her face pale but determined. You should stay here, Walsh said. Let my officers handle this. My daughter is in that house. I understand that, Mr. Ashford, but this is a police operation. If something goes wrong, my daughter is pregnant and sitting on a cold concrete floor. I am not staying anywhere. Walsh studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Stay back. Let my officers secure the scene first. Then you can see her. Understood. The convoy pulled away from the Ashford estate, through empty pre-dawn streets, past sleeping houses and dark storefronts. The city was quiet at this hour, peaceful, unaware that in a brownstone on the Upper East Side, a monster was about to be exposed. Richard watched the building slide past his window, thought about his daughter, about all the years of suffering he had missed, about the grandchild who would be born into the aftermath of all this chaos. He thought about Derek Whitmore, about the charm and the lies and the carefully constructed facade, about the women who had been destroyed before Caroline, about the pattern that had been hidden for so long. Not anymore. Today the truth comes out. The sky was beginning to lighten, pink and gold and pale blue spreading across the horizon. A new day was dawning. For Caroline, it would be the first day of her freedom. For Derek, it would be the last day of his lies. Caroline did not know what time it was when she heard the sirens. She had been drifting in and out of a shallow, uncomfortable doze. Too cold to really sleep, too exhausted to stay fully awake. Her body had started doing strange things in response to the temperature. Shivering had stopped at some point. That was bad, she knew. That meant her core temperature was dropping to dangerous levels. But she was too tired to care anymore. Too tired to fight. Too tired to do anything except sit in her corner and wait for Derek to decide she had learned her lesson. Then she heard the sirens. Faint at first, growing louder. Multiple vehicles, coming closer. Caroline opened her eyes, listened. The sirens stopped, right outside her house. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then she heard the pounding on the front door. Voices, loud, official. Police, open the door. Caroline's heart began to race. Police? Why were the police here? How did they know? She heard Derek's voice, muffled by distance but still audible. Calm, confused, playing his role with practiced perfection. Officers, is something wrong? It is very early. Mr. Whitmore, we have reason to believe your wife is being held against her will in this residence. Caroline's breath caught. They knew. Somehow, impossibly, they knew. She struggled to her feet. Her joints screamed in protest. Her legs felt weak and unsteady. But she managed to stand, to move toward the bottom of the stairs, to listen. Derek's voice again, still calm, still controlled. Caroline, she is asleep upstairs. This is ridiculous. We have video evidence, Mr. Whitmore. We need to see your wife now. Video evidence. The words echoed in Caroline's mind. Video evidence. How was that possible? There were no cameras in the basement. Derek had made sure of that. He had swept the house for surveillance devices when they moved in, paranoid about paparazzi and corporate spies. But her father had installed the security system. Her father, the security technology billionaire, who never trusted anyone completely. Her father, who had given her this house as a wedding gift. The camera. There had to be a camera, one that Derek did not know about, one that had been watching all along. Caroline heard footsteps, multiple sets, voices shouting, and then another voice, one she knew better than her own heartbeat. Where is my daughter? Dad, her father was here. Tears sprang to Caroline's eyes. Her father was here. He knew. He had seen. He had come. More shouting upstairs. Derek's voice raised in protest. Then a loud crash, the sound of wood splintering, footsteps on the stairs, light flooding down into the darkness. Caroline, it is Detective Maureen Walsh. You are safe now. A woman appeared at the bottom of the stairs, silver hair, kind eyes, badge clipped to her belt. Behind her, more figures, officers in uniform. And then, Caroline. Her father came down the stairs two at a time. His face was gray with worry. His eyes were red. He looked older than she had ever seen him look. Older and more fragile and more heartbroken. He reached her, wrapped his coat around her shivering shoulders, pulled her into his arms. "Daddy?" The word came out as a whisper, a child's word. The word she had not used since she was a little girl, sitting on his lap, believing he could protect her from anything in the world. "I am here, sweetheart." His voice was thick with tears. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry I did not see." Carolyn buried her face in his shoulder. The tears came then. All the tears she had been holding back for hours, for months, for years. She cried until she had nothing left, until her whole body shook with the force of her grief, and her father held her, rocked her, let her fall apart in his arms. Margaret appeared at the top of the stairs. She stood there for a long moment, looking down at her husband and daughter huddled together on the basement floor. Her face crumpled. "Caroline, oh my baby." She descended carefully, one hand on the railing. Her designer heels clicked against each step. When she reached the bottom, she lowered herself to the cold concrete beside her husband and wrapped her arms around them both. The three of them held each other in the basement darkness. No words were necessary. Just breath, just heartbeats, just a family reuniting after too long in the shadows. Caroline felt her daughter kick against her grandfather's hand. A greeting, a promise, a reminder that even in the darkest places, life continues. "She is active," Richard said softly. "Strong. She is a fighter." Caroline's voice was hoarse from crying. "Like her grandmother." Margaret laughed through her tears. "And stubborn like her grandfather." For a long moment, they just sat there together, breathing, existing, remembering what it felt like to be a family. Then Detective Walsh cleared her throat gently. "Mrs. Whitmore, I apologize for interrupting, but we need to get you medical attention. Your temperature is dangerously low." Carolyn nodded. She did not have the strength to argue, did not have the strength to do anything except let these people help her. Richard helped her to her feet, kept his arm around her as they climbed the stairs together. The basement that had been her prison for the past 8 hours slowly receded behind her. At the top of the stairs, Carolyn paused, looked back one more time. Never again, she thought. I will never set foot in that darkness again. Upstairs, chaos reigned. Derek was in handcuffs. 2 officers flanked him, their hands on his arms. His silk robe was disheveled. His dark hair was mussed. His eyes, those blue eyes that had once seemed so warm, so charming, were wild with desperation. "This is a mistake," he said as Caroline emerged from the basement. "Caroline, tell them this is all a misunderstanding." Caroline looked at her husband, really looked at him, the man she had married, the man who had promised to love and protect her, the man who had locked her in a cold basement while he drank scotch and watched television. "There is no misunderstanding," she said quietly. "They know everything." Derek's face contorted. The mask slipped. For just a moment, she saw the real man beneath. The coldness, the rage, the absolute contempt for anyone who dared to defy him. "You ungrateful!" He lunged toward her. The officers grabbed him, pulled him back, slammed him against the wall. "Derek Whitmore, you are under arrest for unlawful imprisonment, domestic assault, and coercive control." Detective Walsh's voice was calm and professional. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Derek struggled against the officer's grip. "You cannot do this. My father is a judge. I have lawyers. I will destroy all of you." "Your father's connections will not help you now." Richard's voice was quiet, controlled, deadly. "We have 3 years of video footage. We have witnesses. We have a pattern of abuse that stretches back a decade. Your father's money cannot buy you out of this." Something in Derek's face changed. The desperation gave way to something else. Fear, real, genuine fear. "Richard, let me explain." "There is nothing to explain. I watched you lock my pregnant daughter in a basement. I watched you lie about it to my face." Richard stepped closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You are finished." The officers led Derek out of the house. past the neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalk in their bathrobes, past the news van that had somehow already arrived, past the life he had built on lies and control and cruelty. Carolyn watched him go, watched the man who had terrorized her for 3 years being loaded into the back of a police car, watched the doors slam behind him. It was over. It was finally over. She began to shake, not from cold this time, from relief, from shock, from the overwhelming realization that she was free. Her mother's arms wrapped around her. Her father's hand found hers. "Let us get you to the hospital," Margaret said gently. "Let us make sure you and the baby are okay." Carolyn nodded. Let them guide her toward the waiting ambulance. Let the paramedics help her onto the stretcher. Let them wrap her in warm blankets and check her vital signs. As the ambulance pulled away from the brownstone, she looked back one more time, at the house that had been her prison, at the life she was leaving behind. A new chapter was beginning, and for the first time in 3 years, Carolyn allowed herself to hope. The hospital room was warm and quiet. Soft morning light filtered through pale curtains. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking Caroline's heart rate and her daughter's. Everything was stable. Everything was safe. Caroline lay in the narrow bed, dressed in a clean hospital gown. An IV dripped fluids into her arm. Her body temperature had returned to normal. The color was coming back to her cheeks. Dr. Grace Holloway stood at the foot of the bed, reviewing the chart. She had been Caroline's obstetrician since the beginning of the pregnancy, a kind woman in her mid-40s with gentle hands and observant eyes. "The baby is perfect," Dr. Holloway said, looking up with a reassuring smile. "Strong heartbeat, active movement, no signs of distress despite the ordeal. She is a tough little one." "She takes after her grandmother," Margaret said from the chair beside the bed. She had not left Caroline's side since they arrived at the hospital. Dr. Holloway set down the chart. Her expression grew more serious. "Carolyn, I need to speak with you about something. I have been concerned for several appointments now. The bruises you explained away, the weight loss, the anxiety. The signs were there, and I should have pushed harder. I should have asked more questions." Carolyn shook her head. "You could not have known. I did not want anyone to know." "That is how it works, is it not?" Dr. Holloway's voice was soft with understanding. "These men, they make you feel like you have to hide, like no one would believe you anyway, like it is somehow your fault." "He always said that." Carolyn's voice was barely above a whisper. "That no one would believe me, that everyone would take his side, that I was crazy and paranoid and imagining things." "You were not imagining anything. And now everyone knows the truth." Dr. Holloway touched Caroline's hand gently. "You are incredibly brave. I just wanted you to know that." Caroline did not feel brave. She felt exhausted, hollowed out, like someone had reached inside her and scooped out everything that made her who she was. But she was alive. Her daughter was healthy, and Derek was in a jail cell instead of in the kitchen pouring himself another scotch. Maybe that was enough. For now, maybe that was enough. The next 2 weeks blurred together in a whirlwind of activity. Police interviews, legal meetings, endless paperwork. Reporters camped outside the hospital, then outside her parents' estate. The story had leaked somehow, and suddenly everyone in the city knew about Derek Whitmore and his pregnant wife and the billionaire father who had caught him on camera. Caroline stayed at her parents' home. Her childhood bedroom barely changed from high school. The same lavender walls, the same white furniture, the same photographs on the dresser, her former self preserved in frozen moments. A reminder of who she had been before Derek erased her. Bethany came every day, brought coffee and pastries and terrible reality television. Sat with Caroline for hours talking about nothing and everything. "I should have pushed harder," Bethany said one afternoon. They were curled up on Caroline's childhood bed, a romantic comedy playing unwatched on the laptop between them. "I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. I would not have listened." Carolyn stared at the ceiling. "I could not hear it. Every time you tried to warn me, I found a reason to dismiss it. Still, I should have tried harder, should have shown up at your door, should have forced you to see what was happening." He would have convinced me you were the problem. That is what he did. Everyone who saw through him became an enemy, a threat, someone to be eliminated. Bethany was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and took Caroline's hand. I am here now, whatever you need, for as long as you need it. Caroline squeezed her friend's hand. For the first time in years, she did not feel alone. The legal case against Derek Whitmore built steadily. Victor Langston worked with the prosecutor's office, presented the evidence, the 3 years of surveillance footage, the testimony of the 2 other women from Derek's past, the medical records documenting Caroline's injuries over the years. Allison Hart flew in from Portland, sat in the prosecutor's office, told her story with quiet dignity. He made me think I was losing my mind, she said. Her hands were steady, but her voice trembled. Told everyone I was unstable, paranoid, making things up for attention. By the time it was over, I had lost everything. My friends, my career, my faith in myself. But you are here now, the prosecutor said. You are willing to testify. I have been waiting 10 years for someone to believe me. I would fly around the world if that is what it took. Denise Rawlings came from Boston. Her voice shook, but her words were clear and unflinching. He destroyed my career because I would not date him, made me look incompetent, made everyone think I was a liar. I spent 2 years rebuilding what he tore down in 6 months. The pattern was undeniable. Derek Whitmore selected his victims carefully, charmed them, controlled them, and when they tried to escape, he destroyed them. But this time was different. This time there was evidence he could not explain away. This time someone had been watching. One evening, Caroline sat alone in her childhood bedroom. The house was quiet. Her parents were downstairs, talking in low voices. Bethany had gone home for the night. Caroline stood in front of the mirror, looked at herself, really looked. The woman staring back was a stranger, hollow eyes, careful posture. The kind of small that happens when you make yourself invisible to survive. She touched her own face, her cheek, her jaw. The places where Derek's hands had been, the places that still flinched when someone moved too quickly nearby. I disappeared, she whispered to her reflection. I let him erase me. Her mother appeared in the doorway, watched for a moment, then crossed the room and stood beside her daughter. You are still here, Margaret said softly. You came back. That is what matters. Is it? Caroline's voice cracked. I feel like a ghost, like there is nothing left of who I used to be. There is plenty left. I can see it. The woman I raised, the woman who fought to survive, the woman who is going to be an incredible mother. Margaret took her daughter's hand. That woman is still in there. She never left. She was just waiting for it to be safe to come back. Caroline looked at her reflection again. Tried to see what her mother saw. Maybe there was something there. Some flicker of her former self. Some spark that had not been completely extinguished. Maybe. The restraining order was issued on a Tuesday. 500 feet. Derek Whitmore was not allowed within 500 feet of Caroline, her parents, or any member of their household. He was out on bail. His father, the retired judge, had pulled every string available, called in every favor accumulated over decades on the bench. But even Nathan Whitmore's considerable influence had limits. Derek was under house arrest. Electronic monitoring ankle bracelet, passport confiscated, bank accounts frozen pending the divorce proceedings. The perfect life he had built on lies and manipulation was crumbling around him. Caroline should have felt safe, should have felt relieved. The monster was caged. The threat was contained, but some nights she still woke up in a cold sweat, still checked the locks 3 times before bed, still flinched at sudden sounds, still saw Derek's face in shadows and strangers and reflections in dark windows. The trauma lived in her body now, wrote itself into her nervous system. It would take more than a restraining order to make it go away. She started seeing a therapist, Dr. Ellen Marsh, a specialist in domestic violence recovery. Silver hair, patient eyes, a voice like warm honey. You are asking how you let this happen, Dr. Marsh said in their first session. That is the wrong question. Caroline looked up sharply. What is the right question? How did he hide what he was? What systems protected him? And most importantly, how do you reclaim yourself going forward? Carolyn sat with those words, turned them over in her mind. I want to reclaim my voice, she said finally. I lost it somewhere along the way. He convinced me that my thoughts were wrong. My feelings were wrong. Everything about me was wrong. And now? Now I want to remember what I sound like, what I think, who I am when no one is trying to control me. DeMarsh smiled gently. Then let us start there. They met twice a week. Slowly, painfully, Carolyn began to unpack the 3 years of her marriage. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the gradual erosion of her sense of self. He called it love, she said one afternoon. Rain streaked the office window. A candle flickered on the table between them. Everything he did, he framed it as love. He criticized me because he wanted me to be the best version of myself. He isolated me because he wanted to protect me. He controlled me because he cared so much. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. The alternative was too terrifying to consider. Carolyn stared at her hands. If what he was doing was not love, then I had made a terrible mistake. I had married a monster. I had given my life to someone who did not deserve it. So you convinced yourself it was love? I had to, otherwise I would have had to admit that I was trapped, that I had no way out, that the fairy tale I thought I was living was actually a nightmare. Dr. Marsh nodded slowly. That is how abuse works. It disguises itself as love, uses love as a weapon. By the time you see it clearly, you are already in too deep. I feel so stupid. Caroline's voice broke. Everyone always asks, why did you stay? Why did you not leave? As if it is that simple, as if I was just too dumb to see what was happening. You are not stupid. You are a survivor of systematic psychological manipulation. Dr. Marsh leaned forward. Derek Whitmore spent years perfecting his techniques. He studied you, learned your vulnerabilities, exploited your trust. There is nothing stupid about being deceived by a professional deceiver. Caroline closed her eyes. Let those words sink in. She was not stupid. She was a survivor. Maybe someday she would believe it. One night, alone in her childhood bedroom, Caroline hit rock bottom. Her daughter was kicking, restless, due in less than a month. The weight of everything crashed down at once. The pain, the future, the trial that was coming. The divorce proceedings, the reporters still camped outside the gate. The impossible task of rebuilding a life from the rubble Derek had left behind. She sat on the floor, back against the bed, arms wrapped around her belly, and she cried. Not the quiet tears she had shed in the hospital, not the cathartic sobs in her father's arms. This was something deeper, something raw, the kind of crying that comes from the very bottom of the soul. I do not know how to do this, she whispered to her daughter. I do not know how to be a mother when I can barely be a person. I do not know how to give you a good life when mine is such a mess. Her daughter kicked hard, right against her palm. I am so scared, baby. I am so scared I am going to fail you, that I am too broken to be what you need. Another kick, insistent, demanding. Caroline looked down at her belly, at the life growing inside her. This tiny person who had no idea what her mother was going through, who only knew warmth and heartbeats and the sound of a voice that loved her. I stayed because I thought I could fix it, fix him, fix us. The words came slowly, painfully, like pulling thorns from her own heart. But you cannot fix someone who does not think they are broken. The truth landed with a weight she had not expected, the realization she had been avoiding for 3 years. Derek did not think anything was wrong with him. He thought Caroline was the problem. He thought his behavior was justified, normal, even loving in its own twisted way. There was nothing she could have done to change him, nothing she could have said, nothing she could have sacrificed. He was broken in ways that had nothing to do with her, and she had nearly destroyed herself trying to heal wounds she did not create. I am done, she whispered. I am done trying to fix what cannot be fixed. I am done shrinking to fit his expectations. I am done apologizing for existing. Her daughter kicked again, harder, as if to say, finally, about time. Carolyn laughed, a broken, tear-soaked laugh, but real, a spark of something she had not felt in years. Hope. The weeks that followed were quiet, healing, filled with the slow, unglamorous work of putting herself back together. Carolyn started small, tiny acts of reclamation that no one else would notice. Tiny rebellions against the voice in her head that still sounded like Derek. She bought new clothes, a bright red sweater that Derek would have said was too loud, a pair of jeans that fit comfortably instead of trying to make her look thinner, shoes with actual support instead of the uncomfortable heels he had preferred. She ordered the food she actually wanted at restaurants, spicy dishes he had forbidden because they gave him heartburn, desserts he had criticized because they would make her gain weight, coffee with real cream instead of the skim milk he had insisted upon. She called Bethany every morning, not to report her activities, not to ask permission, just to talk, just to laugh, just to remember what friendship felt like. She started reading again, the art books she had abandoned when Derek said they were pretentious, the novels he had dismissed as frivolous. She devoured them. Remembered what it felt like to have thoughts of her own. She went for walks, slow ones given her pregnant belly, through her parents' garden, down the tree-lined streets of her childhood neighborhood, feeling the sun on her face and the wind in her hair. Small things, ordinary things, but each one was a brick in the foundation of her new life. Her mother watched with quiet pride. "You are coming back," Margaret said one evening. They were sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I can see it, the woman I raised. I am trying. You are succeeding." Margaret reached over and took her daughter's hand. "Every day I see more of you, the real you, not the shadow he tried to make you become." Carolyn leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, something she had not done in years. "I missed you, Mom, even when I was right here, even when we talked on the phone. I missed you." Margaret's arm wrapped around her, held her close. "I missed you too, sweetheart. But you are home now, you are safe, and you are never going back to that life." "Never," Caroline agreed. "No matter what happens, I will never let anyone make me that small again." The baby shower was a small affair, just family and close friends, people who had proven themselves trustworthy, people who loved Caroline for who she was, not for what she could give them. Bethany organized everything, pale yellow decorations because they did not know the baby's gender yet, even though Caroline had known since the 20-week ultrasound. A cake shaped like a rubber duck. Silly games that made everyone laugh. Caroline sat in the center of the living room, surrounded by people who loved her. Opening presents, reading cards, feeling for the first time in years like she belonged somewhere. Her father gave her a necklace, a delicate gold chain with a small pendant shaped like an angel wing. "For protection," Richard said. His voice was gruff with emotion. "I should have protected you better. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you and my granddaughter are safe." "Dad," Carolyn hugged him tight. "You did protect me. You found me. You got me out. If not for you, I would still be in that basement. Or worse. You got yourself out. You survived 3 years with that monster. You protected your daughter. I just opened the door." "Then thank you for opening the door." That night, after the guests had gone, Carolyn sat alone in the nursery her parents had prepared. Pale yellow walls, white furniture, a mobile of stars and moons hanging over the crib. Everything soft and perfect and ready for a new life. She placed her hand on her belly, felt her daughter move beneath her palm. "We made it, baby girl. Against all odds, we made it." Her daughter kicked in response, strong, certain, ready. "I do not know what kind of mother I am going to be. I do not know if I can give you everything you deserve. But I promise you this, I will never let anyone hurt you the way he hurt me. I will teach you to recognize love, real love, not the twisted thing he called by that name." Another kick, another promise acknowledged. "And I will teach you to trust yourself, your instincts, your voice. I will teach you that you matter, that your thoughts matter, that no one has the right to make you feel small." Carolyn smiled, for the first time in years, a real smile, one that reached her eyes. "We are going to be okay. You and me, we are going to be more than okay." The labor started on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks before Caroline's due date. She was sitting in her father's library, curled up in the leather armchair that had been her favorite spot since childhood. A book about the French Impressionists lay open in her lap. Monet's water lilies shimmered on the page, all soft blues and greens, and the gentle suggestion of light dancing on water. For the first time in months, Caroline felt something close to peace. The autumn sun streamed through the tall windows, warming her skin. The house was quiet except for the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Elizabeth was still, for once, not kicking or rolling or doing whatever acrobatic maneuvers she usually performed. Caroline turned a page. Read about Monet's garden at Giverny. Imagined herself there, walking along the curved bridge, trailing her fingers through the water. Then she felt it, a strange sensation, a sudden warmth between her legs. She looked down. The leather chair beneath her was wet. For a moment, her mind went blank. Then understanding crashed through her like a wave. "Mom!" Her voice came out higher than she intended, panicked. "Mom, I think it is time." Margaret appeared in the doorway within seconds. She took one look at her daughter's face, one look at the wet chair, and her expression transformed from casual curiosity to focused determination. "Richard," she called out. "Richard, the baby is coming." The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Margaret helped Caroline to her feet. Richard appeared from his office, his face pale with worry. James brought the car around to the front entrance. Caroline barely registered any of it. Her mind had gone somewhere else, somewhere calm and distant, where she could observe the chaos without being overwhelmed by it. "This is happening. This is really happening. My daughter is coming." The first real contraction hit as they were helping her into the car. A wave of pressure and pain that stole her breath and made her grab her mother's hand so hard that Margaret winced. "Breathe, sweetheart," Margaret said, her voice calm despite the worry in her eyes. "Just breathe. We will be at the hospital soon." Carolyn tried to breathe, tried to remember everything she had learned in the prenatal classes. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Visualize the pain as a wave. Ride it. Do not fight it. It was harder than she expected. So much harder. The pain was not like anything she had experienced before. Not sharp exactly. More like a force. A pressure. Something immense and powerful moving through her body, demanding to be acknowledged. The drive to the hospital took 23 minutes. Carolyn knew because she counted every single one of them. Counted the contractions too. 5 during the drive. Each one stronger than the last. Each one bringing her daughter closer to the world. Richard drove faster than the speed limit. Margaret sat in the back with Caroline, holding her hand, murmuring reassurances. The city streets blurred past the windows. Red lights, yellow cabs. People on sidewalks going about their ordinary Thursday afternoons, unaware that in this car, a new life was about to begin. "Almost there," Richard said from the front seat. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Almost there, sweetheart. Just hold on." Carolyn wanted to tell him that she was fine, that women had been doing this for thousands of years, that her body knew what to do even if her mind was terrified. But another contraction hit, and all she could do was squeeze her mother's hand and try to remember how to breathe. Bethany was waiting at the hospital entrance when they pulled up. She had dropped everything the moment she got Margaret's text, left her office in the middle of a meeting, drove across town at speeds that would have earned her several tickets if any police officers had been paying attention. Now she ran alongside the wheelchair as the nurses rushed Caroline toward the maternity ward. "I am here, Care." Bethany's voice was breathless but steady. "I am right here. You have got this. I am scared." The words came out before Caroline could stop them. Raw, honest, the fear she had been trying to hide. "I know, but you are also the strongest person I have ever met." Bethany squeezed her shoulder. "You survived Derek Whitmore. You survived 3 years of hell. You survived the trial. You can definitely survive this." Carolyn wanted to laugh, wanted to point out that childbirth and surviving an abusive marriage were very different things. But another contraction stole her words, and all she could do was nod. The maternity ward was bright and clean and smelled like antiseptic. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency, guiding Caroline to a delivery room, helping her change into a hospital gown, hooking her up to monitors that would track her contractions and her baby's heartbeat. Dr. Grace Holloway arrived within minutes. She had been at the hospital for another delivery, but she had left instructions to be notified the moment Caroline arrived. "How are we doing?" Dr. Holloway asked, her voice calm and professional. "Terrified," Caroline admitted, "and in a lot of pain. Both completely normal." Dr. Holloway smiled. "Let me examine you and see how far along we are." The examination was quick but thorough. When Dr. Holloway looked up, her expression was pleased. "You are already at 6 centimeters. This baby is eager to meet you. Is that good?" "That is very good. It means we are well on our way." Dr. Holloway patted Caroline's knee. "You are doing beautifully. Just keep breathing. Let your body do what it knows how to do." Richard paced the hallway outside the delivery room. He had wanted to stay inside, wanted to be there for his daughter every moment. But the room was small, and there were already too many people, and Margaret had gently suggested that he might be more comfortable waiting outside. More comfortable, as if comfort was possible right now. His only child was in that room, bringing his grandchild into the world. His daughter, who had been through so much, who had survived things no one should ever have to survive, who was stronger than anyone gave her credit for. Richard stopped pacing, pressed his forehead against the cool wall, closed his eyes. Please let them be okay. Please let Caroline be okay. Please let the baby be healthy. He was not a religious man, had not prayed since he was a child, but right now in this fluorescent-lit hospital hallway, he found himself reaching out to something, anything, whatever force might be listening. Just let them be okay. That is all I ask. A nurse walked past, smiled at him sympathetically. She had probably seen thousands of anxious fathers and grandfathers pacing this same hallway over the years, probably knew exactly what he was feeling. "First grandchild?" she asked. Richard nodded, could not find his voice. "It will be fine. Dr. Holloway is the best. Your daughter is in good hands." "Thank you." The nurse continued down the hallway. Richard resumed his pacing. Inside the delivery room, time lost all meaning. Carolyn existed in a world of contractions and breathing and the steady beep of monitors. Margaret held one hand, Bethany held the other. Dr. Holloway moved in and out of her field of vision, checking progress, offering encouragement. The pain was immense, overwhelming, unlike anything Caroline had ever experienced. But there was something else too, a sense of purpose, of power. Her body knew what to do. Her body had been designed for this moment. "You are doing so well," Margaret murmured. Her voice was a lifeline in the storm of sensation. "I am so proud of you, sweetheart." "I cannot do this," Carolyn gasped. Another contraction was building. She could feel it gathering strength, preparing to crash over her. "You can," Bethany said firmly. "You are doing it. Right now, you are amazing." The contraction peaked. Caroline gripped both hands so hard she was sure she would leave bruises. Somewhere in the distance, she heard herself making sounds. Primal sounds, the sounds of a woman bringing life into the world. Then the contraction passed. A moment of relief, a chance to breathe. "Oh, good centimeters," Dr. Holloway announced. "Almost there. You are doing beautifully." Almost there. Almost there. Almost there. Carolyn closed her eyes, thought about her daughter, thought about the life growing inside her, fighting to be born, thought about everything they had been through together. The basement, the cold concrete floor, the hours of fear and uncertainty. Her daughter had been there for all of it, had felt Caroline's terror, had heard Caroline's whispered promises. "I will protect you. I will give you a good life. I will never let anyone hurt you the way he hurt me." Now those promises were about to become real. Now her daughter was about to enter the world, and Caroline would spend the rest of her life making sure those promises were kept. The final stage of labor was the hardest. Dr. Holloway told her to push. Caroline pushed, with everything she had, with every ounce of strength she possessed. "I can see the head," Dr. Holloway said. Her voice was excited now. "She has dark hair, just like you. Dark hair, like me, like my mother, like my grandmother." Carolyn pushed again. felt something shift, something change, a pressure that had been building for hours suddenly released. And then a cry, strong, healthy, perfect. "It is a girl," Dr. Holloway announced. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. A beautiful, perfect girl. They placed Elizabeth on Caroline's chest, skin to skin. That tiny body still warm from the womb. Caroline's womb, still covered in the fluids of birth. Eyes squeezed shut, fists clenched. A mouth open in a cry that was the most beautiful sound Caroline had ever heard. For a long moment, Caroline could not move, could not speak, could only stare at this tiny person who had just emerged from her body, this life she had created, this miracle she had been carrying for 9 months. "Hello, Elizabeth," she whispered finally. Her voice was hoarse from screaming, rough with tears. "I've been waiting so long to meet you." Elizabeth's cries softened, her eyes opened, unfocused, searching, and somehow, impossibly, they seemed to find her mother's face. Carolyn counted 10 fingers, 10 toes, that perfect rosebud mouth, those downy wisps of dark hair, just like Dr. Holloway had said, a nose that might be Caroline's, a chin that might be her father's. It did not matter whose features she had inherited. She was perfect, absolutely perfect. "She is beautiful," Margaret breathed. Tears were streaming down her face. "Oh, Caroline, she is so beautiful." "She is," Bethany agreed. Her voice was thick with emotion. "She looks just like you." Caroline could not take her eyes off her daughter, this tiny person who had no idea what her mother had been through, who knew nothing of basements and locked doors and cold concrete floors, who knew only warmth and safety and the sound of a voice that loved her. "You will never know that fear," Caroline whispered to her daughter. "You will never know what it feels like to be trapped, to be controlled, to be erased. I will make sure of it. I promise." Elizabeth blinked, yawned, snuggled closer to her mother's chest, a promise acknowledged, a new chapter beginning. Richard met his granddaughter an hour after her birth. He entered the delivery room slowly, hesitantly, as if afraid he might disturb the miracle that had just occurred. Margaret was sitting beside the bed, holding Caroline's hand. Bethany had stepped out to make phone calls, to spread the news to everyone who was waiting. Caroline looked exhausted, hair damp with sweat, face pale with fatigue. But her eyes were shining with a light that Richard had not seen in years, a light he had been afraid was extinguished forever. "Dad," Caroline's voice was soft, "come meet your granddaughter." Richard approached the bed, looked down at the tiny bundle in his daughter's arms, at the small face, eyes closed now in sleep, at the miniature fingers curled against a miniature palm. "Can I hold her?" Caroline nodded. Carefully, gently, she transferred Elizabeth into her father's arms. Richard had held babies before, had held Caroline when she was this small 30 years ago. But this felt different. This felt sacred. Like he was holding something infinitely precious, infinitely fragile. "She is perfect," he whispered. His voice cracked. "Absolutely perfect." "She is," Caroline agreed. 10 fingers, 10 toes, healthy lungs, as you probably heard. Richard laughed softly. The baby stirred in his arms but did not wake. "What is her name?" "Elizabeth Rose." "Elizabeth after your mother, Mom. Rose after the garden where I used to play as a child." Margaret made a soft sound, more tears streaming down her face. "My mother would have loved that," she said. "She would have been so proud of you, Carolyn. So proud of everything you have overcome." "I hope so." Caroline looked at her daughter, sleeping peacefully in her grandfather's arms. "I want Elizabeth to know about her, about all the strong women in our family. I want her to know that she comes from a long line of survivors." Richard looked up from his granddaughter's face, met his daughter's eyes. "You are the strongest of all of them," he said quietly. "What you survived, what you endured, what you are building now. Your grandmother would have been in awe of you." Caroline's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. A real smile, the kind he had been afraid he would never see again. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Both of you." Richard looked back down at Elizabeth. "I will protect you with everything I have. Both of you for as long as I live." I know you will. The first night in the hospital was long and sleepless. Elizabeth woke every 2 hours, demanding to be fed. Carolyn was exhausted, sore, overwhelmed. But every time she looked at her daughter's face, every time she felt that tiny mouth latching onto her breast, she felt a rush of love so powerful it nearly knocked the breath out of her. This is what it is supposed to feel like. This is real love, not the twisted thing Derek called by that name. This. Margaret stayed through the night, dozed in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, woke every time Elizabeth cried, helped Caroline position the baby for feeding, changed diapers when Caroline was too exhausted to move. You do not have to stay, Caroline said at 3 in the morning. Elizabeth had just finished eating and was drifting back to sleep. You must be exhausted. I am exactly where I want to be. Margaret smoothed the hair back from Caroline's forehead, a gesture from childhood, a gesture that said, I am here. I am not going anywhere. I miss so much of your life these past 3 years. I am not missing any more. Mom, Carolyn's voice broke. I am so sorry for pushing you away, for letting him convince me that you were the problem. You have nothing to apologize for. He manipulated you. He manipulated all of us. Margaret's voice was fierce. The only person who should be apologizing is him, and he is going to have 15 years in prison to think about what he did. Carolyn looked down at Elizabeth, at her daughter's peaceful face, at the future they were going to build together. She is never going to know him. I decided that. He will never be part of her life. Good. That is the right decision. I just hope, Carolyn hesitated, I hope I can be a good mother. I do not exactly have a great model for what a healthy relationship looks like. You have a better model than you think. Margaret took her hand. You know what love is supposed to feel like now. Real love. The kind that does not hurt. The kind that does not control. The kind that builds you up instead of tearing you down. I do? Look at how you feel about Elizabeth. That is love. Look at how your father and I feel about you. That is love. Look at how Bethany has stood by you through everything. That is love. Margaret squeezed her hand. You know what it looks like. You will teach Elizabeth, and you will both be fine. Carolyn wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that the damage Derek had done could be undone, that she could build something healthy and whole from the wreckage of her marriage. She looked at Elizabeth again, at this tiny person who trusted her completely, who depended on her for everything. I will figure it out. For her sake, I will learn how to be the mother she deserves. They left the hospital 3 days later. Richard had arranged for a small army of security guards to escort them, just in case. Derek was still in jail awaiting sentencing, but Nathan Whitmore had money and connections. Richard was not taking any chances. The drive back to the Ashford estate was quiet. Elizabeth slept in her car seat, oblivious to the world she had just entered. Carolyn watched her daughter's face, marveled at how peaceful she looked, how trusting. You have no idea what is out there, all the dangers, all the pain. But I will protect you from it. I will build a wall around you so high that nothing can hurt you. Even as she thought it, she knew it was impossible. She could not protect Elizabeth from everything, could not shield her from every heartbreak and disappointment and fear. But she could give her the tools to survive, the strength to overcome, the knowledge that she was loved unconditionally and forever. That would have to be enough. The nursery at the Ashford estate was ready and waiting. Margaret had overseen every detail, pale yellow walls because they had decided not to find out the baby's gender. And yellow worked for everyone. White furniture that would grow with Elizabeth as she got older. A mobile of stars and moons hanging over the crib, catching the light and casting gentle shadows on the ceiling. Carolyn stood in the doorway, Elizabeth in her arms, and felt tears prick her eyes. It is perfect, she whispered. Mom, it is absolutely perfect. I wanted her to have the best. Margaret stood beside her, one arm around her daughter's shoulders. She deserves the best. Carolyn walked into the room, looked at the crib, the changing table, the rocking chair in the corner, where she would spend countless hours in the months to come, feeding and soothing and singing lullabies. This was real. This was happening. She was a mother now. She had a daughter who depended on her for everything. The weight of that responsibility should have been terrifying, and it was in some ways, but it was also exhilarating, empowering. She had survived Derek Whitmore. She had survived the trial. She had brought this beautiful, perfect child into the world. She could do anything. The first weeks at home were a blur of feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights. Carolyn learned her daughter's cries, the hungry cry, sharp and demanding, the tired cry, whimpering and fussy, the uncomfortable cry, squirming and frustrated. She learned what soothed Elizabeth and what upset her, learned the rhythm of her sleep patterns, learned the particular way she liked to be held, head nestled against Caroline's shoulder, one hand fisted in Caroline's shirt. She fell deeper in love with every passing day, this tiny person who had been inside her body just weeks ago, who had been with her through everything, who had kicked against her palm in the darkness of the basement as if to say, "We will survive this. We will be okay." Now Elizabeth was here, in the world, separate but still connected, still dependent, still needing Caroline in a way that nothing and no one had ever needed her before. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was the most important thing Caroline had ever done. Bethany came by every few days, brought coffee and pastries, held Elizabeth so Caroline could shower or nap or just have 5 minutes to herself. "She is getting so big," Bethany said one afternoon. Elizabeth was 3 weeks old, cradled in Bethany's arms, staring up at her with those unfocused newborn eyes. "I swear she has grown since last time I saw her. She is eating constantly. I feel like a dairy cow." Bethany laughed. "The most beautiful dairy cow I have ever seen." Carolyn smiled. She was tired, so tired. But it was a different kind of tired than what she had felt during her marriage. That tiredness had been soul deep, hopeless. This tiredness was physical, temporary, and underneath it was a bedrock of joy that nothing could shake. "How are you really doing?" Bethany asked. Her voice was gentler now, serious. "I am okay. Good, actually." Carolyn paused, considered. "Better than I expected. I thought I would be more, I do not know, damaged, broken, but Elizabeth gives me something to focus on, something positive. She makes it easier to keep moving forward." "You were never broken, Care. You were wounded. There is a difference." "Maybe." Carolyn watched her daughter, watched Elizabeth yawn and stretch and settle back into sleep. "I still have bad days. Days when I hear a door slam and I freeze. Days when I look in the mirror and still see the person he wanted me to be instead of who I really am. That is normal. That is healing." "I know. Dr. Marsh says the same thing." Carolyn smiled softly. "But there are more good days than bad now. And Elizabeth, she is teaching me how to love myself again, because I have to love myself if I am going to teach her how to love herself." Bethany's eyes were wet. "That is beautiful." "It is true." Caroline reached over and touched her daughter's cheek. So soft, so perfect. "She saved me, Bethany. I thought I was saving her, protecting her from him. But really, she was saving me, giving me a reason to fight, a reason to survive. You saved each other." "I suppose we did." The trial of Derek Whitmore began on a Monday morning in late spring, 8 months after Elizabeth was born. Caroline had spent the previous night unable to sleep. She had walked the halls of her parents' estate, Elizabeth in her arms, trying to quiet her racing mind. The baby had sensed her mother's anxiety and refused to settle, fussing and squirming until nearly dawn. Now Caroline stood in front of her bedroom mirror, examining her reflection. Navy blue dress, conservative but not frumpy, her mother's pearls around her neck, hair pulled back in a neat twist that made her look older than her 30 years. She looked like a different person than the woman who had been locked in that basement. That woman had been hollow, defeated, a ghost of herself. This woman was solid, present, alive. "You can do this," she told her reflection. "You survived him. You can survive this." The face in the mirror did not look entirely convinced, but it nodded anyway. The courthouse was a massive stone building in downtown Manhattan, steps leading up to columned entrances, security guards checking bags. Reporters clustered on the sidewalk, cameras ready, microphones extended. Caroline had known there would be media attention. The case had been covered extensively. Billionaire's daughter, abusive husband, 3 years of surveillance footage. It was the kind of story that sold newspapers and generated clicks. But knowing about the attention and experiencing it were two different things. As her father's car pulled up to the curb, Carolyn felt her stomach clench. "You do not have to talk to them," Richard said. He was sitting beside her, his hand covering hers. "Just walk. Look straight ahead. I will be right beside you." "I know." Caroline took a deep breath. "I am ready." But she did not move, could not make herself open the car door. "Carolyn," her father's voice was gentle, "whatever happens in there, it does not define you. Your worth is not determined by a jury's verdict. Your healing does not depend on his punishment." "I know that." Another deep breath. I need to face him. I need to look at him and know that he does not have power over me anymore. That is why I am here." Richard squeezed her hand. "Then let us go show him." The courtroom was smaller than Caroline had expected. She had imagined something grand, dramatic, like the courtrooms in movies and television shows. Instead, it was a relatively modest room with wooden benches and fluorescent lights and the general air of bureaucratic functionality. Derek was already there. He sat at the defense table, flanked by his lawyers. Orange jumpsuit, handcuffs. He looked thinner than she remembered, paler. The months in jail had stripped away some of his polish, but his eyes were the same. Those blue eyes that had once seemed so warm, so charming. Now they were cold, calculating, watching her as she entered the room. Carolyn made herself meet his gaze, made herself hold it for a long moment. "I am not afraid of you anymore. I am not the woman you created. I am someone new, someone you can never touch again." She looked away first, but it was her choice, her decision, not a retreat, a dismissal. She took her seat beside the prosecutor. Her father sat behind her in the gallery. Her mother was at home with Elizabeth, watching the proceedings on the news. Bethany was somewhere in the back of the courtroom, ready to offer support if needed. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The trial began. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They started with the surveillance footage, 3 years of evidence, edited into a chronological narrative. The jury watched in silence as Derek Whitmore's true nature was revealed, frame by frame. Caroline in the basement, curled on the cold floor, crying. Carolyn with bruises on her arms, trying to hide them from the camera she did not know existed. Derek's voice, cold and contemptuous, filtering down from upstairs. "You will stay there until you learn to respect me." And finally, the night that had started everything. Carolyn, 8 months pregnant, locked in the basement while her husband drank scotch and watched television. The hours ticking by, the cold settling into her bones. Some of the jurors looked sick. Others looked angry. One woman in the back row was crying. Carolyn watched the footage too, forced herself to watch. It was strange seeing herself from the outside, seeing the woman she had been, the woman who had been so broken, so defeated, so lost. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone she had known once, a long time ago, someone she had left behind in that basement. The other witnesses testified over the following days. Allison Hart flew in from Portland. She took the stand with quiet dignity, her voice steady despite the obvious pain. "He made me think I was crazy," she said, "told everyone I was unstable. By the time it was over, I had lost everything. My friends, my reputation, my belief in myself. It took me 10 years to rebuild what he destroyed in 2. The jury listened intently. Several of them were taking notes. Denise Rawlings came from Boston. Her hands shook as she described how Derek had sabotaged her career after she refused to date him. "I was good at my job, really good. But he made everyone think I was incompetent, dishonest. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. No one would hire me. I spent 2 years struggling to survive, all because I said no to him." The pattern was clear, undeniable. Derek Whitmore was not just an abuser, he was a predator, a serial manipulator who had spent years perfecting his techniques. And now, finally, he was being held accountable. Carolyn's turn to testify came on the fifth day of the trial. She had been preparing for this moment for months, practicing with the prosecutor, working through her anxiety with Dr. Marsh, reminding herself over and over that she had nothing to be ashamed of, that she was not the one on trial. But as she walked to the witness stand, her legs felt weak. Her heart was pounding. Her palms were damp with sweat. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat down in the witness chair. Derek was watching her. She could feel his eyes on her, even though she refused to look at him. "You have no power here. You have no power over me. Not anymore." The prosecutor began with easy questions. Her name, her age, how she had met Derek, the early days of their relationship. Caroline answered carefully, clearly, the way she had practiced. Then the questions got harder. "Mrs. Whitmore, can you describe what happened on the night of October 15th? Caroline took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she looked directly at the jury. "I saw a text message on my husband's phone from a woman named Natalie. It said, 'Miss you already,' with a heart emoji. I asked him about it. He got angry. He grabbed my arm and pushed me toward the basement stairs. He locked me in the basement. I was 8 months pregnant." "How long were you in the basement?" "Approximately 8 hours, from around 10 at night until after 5 in the morning." "Can you describe the conditions in the basement?" "It was cold, unfinished, concrete floors. The only light came from a small window near the ceiling. There was no heat, no blankets, nothing to sit on except an old patio cushion I found against the wall." "Did your husband check on you at any point during those 8 hours?" "No." "Did he respond when you called out to him?" "No." "What were you feeling during those hours in the basement?" Carolyn paused, considered. This was the part she had struggled with the most in practice. How to put into words the terror of that night, the despair, the absolute certainty that no one was coming to help. "I was scared," she said finally. "Scared for myself, scared for my baby. I did not know if he was ever going to let me out. I did not know what would happen if I went into labor down there, alone, in the cold." She paused again, felt the emotion rising in her chest, pushed it down, kept going. "But mostly I felt resigned, because that night was not unusual. It was just the worst example of something that had been happening for 3 years. He had locked me in places before. The guest room, the garage, the basement. It was how he punished me when I displeased him." "Objection." Derek's lawyer stood up. "The witness is making characterizations about my client's intentions." "Overruled." The judge's voice was flat. "The witness may describe her experiences. Sit down." Carolyn continued. "He controlled everything. What I wore, who I saw, how I spent my time. He isolated me from my family and friends. He criticized me constantly, made me feel like I was worthless, like I was crazy, like everything that went wrong was my fault." "And why did you not leave?" The question every abuse survivor dreaded. The question that implied she was somehow complicit in her own suffering. Carolyn had thought about this moment for months, had crafted her answer with care. "I did not leave because I could not see clearly. Abuse does not announce itself. It does not show up on the first date wearing a sign that says, 'I will destroy you.' It creeps in slowly, gradually. By the time I recognized it for what it was, I did not recognize myself anymore." She looked at the jury, made eye contact with each of them in turn. "He apologized every time, bought me gifts, told me he loved me. I thought that meant he was trying to change. I thought if I was just patient enough, just understanding enough, just perfect enough, things would get better." Her voice grew stronger now, clearer. "But apologies without change are not apologies. They are resets. They are permission to do it again, and again, and again. I did not stay because I was stupid. I stayed because I was trapped in a prison I could not even see. A prison he had built around me, brick by brick, over 3 years. The courtroom was silent. No further questions, the prosecutor said. Derek's lawyer tried to rattle her on cross-examination. He was aggressive, condescending, clearly trying to make her look unstable, unreliable, motivated by revenge. Is it not true that you come from a wealthy family, Mrs. Whitmore? Yes. And is it not true that your father installed surveillance cameras in your home without your husband's knowledge? He installed a security system. My father is in the security business. It was a gift that included secret cameras in the basement. A camera, singular, and my husband did not know about it because my father did not trust him. So your father was spying on your marriage from the beginning. My father was protecting his daughter. As it turned out, he was right to do so. But the lawyer tried a different approach. You mentioned that your husband apologized after these alleged incidents. Yes. And bought you gifts. Yes. Is it possible that you misinterpreted his behavior? That what you saw as control was actually concern? Carolyn almost laughed. Almost. Concern does not lock a pregnant woman in a basement for 8 hours. Concern does not leave bruises on someone's arms. Concern does not systematically isolate someone from everyone who loves them. But no, Carolyn's voice was firm, strong. I spent 3 years being told that my perceptions were wrong, that I was crazy, that I was imagining things. I am not going to let you do the same thing to me in this courtroom. The lawyer opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the judge. No further questions. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Caroline waited in a small room with her father, Victor Langston, and Bethany. Her mother had come to the courthouse, Elizabeth in a carrier, to be there when the verdict was announced. The waiting was agony. Every minute felt like an hour. Every sound in the hallway made Caroline jump. The evidence is overwhelming, Victor kept saying. The footage alone would be enough. There is no way they do not convict. Carolyn nodded, tried to believe him, but 3 years of gaslighting had left their mark. Some part of her still expected Derek to win, still expected to be told that she was the crazy one, the liar, the problem. Mama, Elizabeth's voice cut through her anxiety. Her daughter was reaching for her, pudgy arms extended, face scrunched with determination. Carolyn took her daughter from Margaret, held her close, breathed in that sweet baby smell. This is what matters. This little person, this new life. Whatever happens in that courtroom, I have her. I have my family. I have myself. Da-da-da, Elizabeth said, patting Caroline's face. That is right, baby girl. Carolyn kissed her daughter's forehead. Mama is right here. The call came at 4:47 in the afternoon. The jury had reached a verdict. Carolyn handed Elizabeth back to Margaret, stood up, smoothed her dress, walked back into the courtroom on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. Derek was already at the defense table. He looked worse than he had that morning, paler, smaller, like the reality of what was about to happen was finally sinking in. Good, Caroline thought. Let him feel afraid. Let him feel powerless. Let him understand what it is like to have your fate in someone else's hands. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The jury filed in. 12 ordinary people. 12 strangers who had spent the past 2 weeks listening to the story of Caroline's marriage. 12 people who held Derek Whitmore's future in their hands. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. The foreperson stood. A middle-aged woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She looked at Caroline just for a moment and nodded. On the charge of unlawful imprisonment in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Caroline's breath caught. On the charge of assault in the second degree, we find the defendant guilty. Behind her, she heard her mother make a soft sound, a sob of relief. On the charge of coercive control in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty. On all counts. On every charge. Derek's face went white. His lawyers slumped in their chairs. In the gallery, Cynthia Whitmore burst into tears. Nathan Whitmore sat frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. Caroline felt the tears streaming down her own face, but she was smiling. For the first time since this nightmare began, she was truly, completely smiling. She turned to look at Derek. One last time, she wanted him to see her face, wanted him to see that she was not broken, that she had survived, that she had won. He met her eyes, and for just a moment, she saw something in his expression that she had never seen before. Fear, real, genuine fear. The fear of a man who had finally been held accountable. The fear of a man who was about to lose everything. Good. The sentencing came 6 weeks later. The judge was thorough, methodical. He reviewed the evidence, noted the pattern of behavior, acknowledged the testimony of the other victims. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, looking directly at Derek, "you have demonstrated a pattern of predatory behavior spanning more than a decade. You have systematically targeted, manipulated, and abused multiple women. You have shown no remorse, no understanding of the harm you have caused." Derek sat motionless. His lawyers had told him to show emotion, to appear contrite, but he could not do it, could not pretend to feel something he did not feel. "It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 15 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for a minimum of 12 years. 15 years. 12 years before he could even apply for parole. Carolyn let out a breath she had not known she was holding. It was over. It was finally, truly over. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining. Carolyn stood on the steps, surrounded by her family, her father on one side, her mother on the other, Elizabeth in her arms. Bethany stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder. Reporters were shouting questions. Cameras were flashing. But Caroline barely noticed. She was looking at her daughter's face, at those bright eyes, so full of curiosity and wonder, at that toothless smile that could light up any room. "We did it, baby girl," she whispered. "We are free." Elizabeth grabbed her mother's nose, giggled. "Mrs. Whitmore," a reporter pushed forward. "Do you have any comment on the verdict?" Carolyn considered ignoring the question, walking away, going home to start the next chapter of her life. But something made her stop, turn, face the cameras. "I want other women to know something," she said. Her voice was clear, strong. "If you are in a situation like mine, it is not your fault. You are not crazy. You are not imagining things. And you are not alone." She paused, gathered her thoughts. "It took me 3 years to get out. 3 years of isolation and manipulation and fear. But I got out, and you can too. It will not be easy. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. But on the other side of that struggle is freedom. Real freedom. The kind of freedom where you get to decide who you are and what you want and how you live your life." She looked down at Elizabeth, then back at the cameras. "I am not a victim anymore. I am a survivor. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure my daughter knows what real love looks like, what real respect looks like, what real partnership looks like." She turned away from the reporters, started walking down the steps toward her father's waiting car. "Thank you, Caroline." The reporter's voice was softer now, almost gentle. "Good luck." Caroline smiled, kept walking. She did not need luck anymore. She had something better. She had herself. 1 year later, Caroline stood at the window of her new apartment. It was a bright September morning, the kind of morning that made you believe anything was possible. Sunlight streamed through the glass, painting golden rectangles on the hardwood floor. The smell of fresh coffee drifted from the kitchen. Outside, the city was waking up, filling with the sounds of traffic and voices and life. Behind her, Elizabeth was having a very serious conversation with a stuffed elephant. She was 18 months old now, walking and talking and getting into everything. She had her mother's dark hair and her grandfather's stubborn chin and a personality that was entirely her own. "Ella want juice," Elizabeth announced, holding up the elephant. "Ella can have juice after breakfast," Carolyn replied, not turning from the window. "And so can you. Juice now. Breakfast first, then juice." Elizabeth considered this, weighed her options, apparently decided that a tantrum was not worth the effort. "Okay, Mama." Caroline smiled. Her daughter was learning to negotiate, to compromise, to accept that she could not always get what she wanted immediately. These were skills that would serve her well in life. The apartment was small but perfect. 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, a living room filled with art and books, and all the things Caroline had denied herself during her marriage. It was hers, every inch of it. She had chosen the furniture, picked the colors, hung the paintings. No one had told her what to do or how to do it. Freedom, real freedom, the kind Derek had tried to steal from her. She had gone back to work 6 months ago, part-time at a small gallery in the village, similar to the one where she had worked before her marriage. The owner was a friend of her mother's, understanding about Caroline's need for flexible hours, supportive of her continued healing. It was not the career she had imagined for herself at 26, not the straight trajectory from graduate school to gallery director that she had planned, but it was good. It was hers, and it was enough. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from Bethany. Coffee later? There is someone I want you to meet. No pressure, just coffee. Carolyn smiled. Bethany had been trying to set her up for months. A colleague's brother, a friend from yoga class, a guy she met at a bookstore who seemed really nice. Caroline had said no to all of them. She was not ready, might not be ready for a long time. The idea of trusting someone again, of opening herself up to the possibility of hurt, still felt impossible. But she was not saying no to coffee. Coffee was safe. Coffee was just two people talking. Coffee did not have to mean anything. Maybe she typed back, "Let me think about it." The response came immediately. 3 heart emojis and a dancing woman. Caroline laughed, tucked her phone into her pocket, turned back to her daughter. "Ready for breakfast, baby girl?" "Ready." Elizabeth abandoned the elephant and toddled toward the kitchen. "Pancakes? How about oatmeal?" "Pancakes. Oatmeal with bananas." Elizabeth considered this counteroffer. "Oatmeal with chocolate? Nice try. Oatmeal with bananas." "Okay, Mama." They had this negotiation every morning. Elizabeth always asked for something unreasonable. Caroline always offered something reasonable. They always ended up somewhere in the middle. It was, Caroline realized, a pretty good metaphor for life. That evening, after Elizabeth was asleep, Caroline sat at her desk by the window. The city lights sparkled in the darkness. A million windows, a million lives, a million stories playing out behind closed doors. Some of those stories were happy, some were sad, some were complicated mixtures of both. Her own story had been all of those things. Happiness and sadness and confusion and fear, and finally hope. A story she was still writing. A story that was nowhere near finished. She opened her journal, the leather-bound notebook she had started keeping a year ago on Dr. Marsh's recommendation. A place to put her thoughts, her feelings, her memories, a way of making sense of everything she had been through. She turned to a fresh page, picked up her pen, began to write. "Dear Elizabeth, someday you will be old enough to understand what happened. Someday you will ask questions about your father, about why he is not in your life, about what went wrong. I am writing this so you will know the truth, not the version he would tell, if he ever got the chance, not the version the tabloids printed, the truth as best as I can explain it." She paused, thought about what she wanted to say, what she needed her daughter to understand. Your father was not a monster, not in the way that word is usually meant. He did not hit me every day. He did not threaten my life. He did not do the obvious, dramatic things that people think of when they hear the word abuse. What he did was subtler, more insidious. He made me doubt myself, made me feel like I was crazy, like I was worthless, like I was lucky to have him because no one else would want me. He isolated me from everyone who loved me, controlled every aspect of my life, made himself the center of my universe, and then used that power to hurt me. By the time I realized what was happening, I had forgotten who I was. I had become a shadow, a ghost, a woman who existed only to serve his needs and avoid his anger. Carolyn felt the tears streaming down her face, did not wipe them away, let them fall. I am telling you this not to make you hate him, not to make you afraid. I am telling you so you will recognize the signs if you ever see them in your own life or in someone else's. Love does not control. Love does not isolate. Love does not make you feel small. Real love makes you stronger, makes you braver, makes you more yourself, not less. I did not know that when I married your father. I thought I did, but I did not. I thought love meant sacrificing yourself for someone else, giving up your own needs and wants and dreams, being whatever they wanted you to be. I was wrong. Real love is partnership, respect, support. It is two people walking side by side, not one person dragging the other down. That is what I want for you. That is what I will teach you. That is what I hope you will find someday when you are ready. Carolyn paused again, reread what she had written, added a few more lines. You saved me, Elizabeth. Did you know that? You were with me in that basement, kicking against my palm, reminding me that I had something to live for, something to fight for. Every time I wanted to give up, I thought about you, about the life I wanted to give you, about the mother I wanted to be. You made me brave. You made me strong. You made me remember who I was before him. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you, trying to give you everything you deserve, trying to show you every single day what real love looks like. You are my heart, my hope, my reason for everything. I love you more than words can say. Forever and always, Mom. Caroline closed the journal, set down her pen, looked out at the city lights. She thought about the woman she had been, the woman who had stood at a window at her father's charity gala, dreaming of a future full of possibility. She thought about the woman she had become, the woman who had survived 3 years of abuse, who had fought her way back from the edge of destruction, who had built a new life from the rubble of the old. She thought about the woman she was still becoming, the mother, the survivor, the artist, the friend, all the pieces of herself that she was slowly putting back together. The basement door was never about the basement. It was about control, about making me small, about erasing who I was. But here's the thing about being erased. You can always rewrite yourself. She stood up from the desk, walked to Elizabeth's room, stood in the doorway, watching her daughter sleep. That peaceful face, those tiny hands, that complete, unshakable trust. This was her reason, her purpose, her everything. She was not the woman Derek had tried to create. She was not the victim. She was not the shadow. She was Caroline Ashford, mother, survivor, artist, and she was just getting started. The next morning, Caroline texted Bethany back. Okay, coffee, but just coffee. The response was immediate. 3 more heart emojis, a dancing woman, and a message. I knew you would say yes eventually. 3 o'clock, the place on Madison. Wear something cute, Caroline laughed. Put down her phone, picked up her daughter. Guess what, baby girl? Mama's going to have coffee with a stranger today. Coffee, Elizabeth clapped her hands. Not for you, you get juice, juice. Caroline kissed her daughter's forehead, held her close. Whatever happened next, she was ready. Ready to take risks, ready to trust again, ready to believe that the best parts of her life were still ahead. The past was behind her. The future was waiting. And for the first time in years, Caroline was not afraid to reach for it. And that is where our story ends. But for so many women, this story is still being written. If Caroline's journey touched your heart today, if her strength inspired you, if her words made you think about someone you know who might be struggling in silence, then I have a small favor to ask. Hit that like button. Not for me, but for every woman who needs to know she is not alone. Leave a comment below. Share your thoughts. Share your support. Your words might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel and tap that notification bell. Because every week we share stories of strength, survival, and the unbreakable human spirit. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life you might change. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, no matter how dark the basement, there is always a door waiting to be opened. See you in the next story.